Lords, I rise to speak on Amendment 92 in my name, and the amendment is simple and straightforward. It recognises that solar farms have a role to play on our energy security, but that role must be balanced with an effective use of the best farmland for food security. And my Lords, I have to observe that the lack of Labour Party backbenchers on the government benches says more than we even need to think about their views on farm and food security. Now, this amendment will not prevent or fetter the development of solar farms on the poorest quality land or restrain smaller proposals on the best land, where they command the support of the local planning authority. But where large-scale solar proposals come forward that include the best and most versatile land, my amendment means that the National Significantly Infrastructure Process, the NSIP, will not and cannot be engaged. To be clear, this isn't an absolute ban on large-scale solar farms on the best land. It's just that if those proposals come forward, they will need to be determined locally by the planning authority. Now, it's said that modern society is no more than 3 meals away from breakdown, and in the hierarchy of needs, food in the belly is the #1 priority. And when the chips are down, you can't eat a solar panel. Now, last year, the national wheat yield was down 20% on account of wet weather. This year, the yield impairment is similar, but because of dry weather. And just as there are no guarantees on the weather, we cannot be careless with our food supply. Now, I've recently heard encouraging noises from DEFRA ministers who belatedly realise that the risks of food security are greater than they have ever been before, that the best land should be preserved for food production, where inputs can be used most productively, and the poorest and least productive land can be harnessed for other uses, environmental, amenity, or economic. And I welcome this sinner that hath repenteth, and I venture there is now common ground between people like myself, who appreciate and value food security, and the government, which should make acceptance of my amendment easy to achieve, so that the right balance is struck between heating and eating. Now, I won't go into quite so much detail as my noble friend, but let's talk about what I mean by the best and most versatile land, because the library tells me that under the 1966 agricultural land classification process, the grade 1, 2 and 3A land comprises 42% of the cultivated area of Great Britain. And by difference, therefore, the substantial majority, 58% of the agricultural land, is in the poorer grades, 3B, 4 and 5. Now, this would still be available for large-scale solar energy under my amendment, and there are millions of poor hectares to go at. That's over 12 Norfolks, or more than 2.5 Wales's. You'll note I don't go down the football pitch analogy. Now, at the dispatch box, the noble Baroness Lady Hayman explained last year, in the case of a recently approved Seneca proposal in Suffolk, that the proposal did not include some of the best and most versatile land. Now, I will not criticise her for an honest mistake, but I regret to tell the House that there was plenty of the best land, including Grade 2 land, in that proposal. Land that is now lost to food production for a generation. My Lords, on so many levels, the government's rhetoric is at odds with the reality. They've lost control of the numbers, and in so doing are imperiling our food security, which is national security. So that in Lincolnshire, the county that in more than any other puts bread on our tables, already 2% of that county is under threat from solar. And worse, thanks to my noble friend Lord Frost, we learn that the majority of the Heckingham proposal is predominantly the best Grade 1 land under the 1966 rules. Now, in Norfolk, in an answer to a written question last November, the government reported that 1,400 hectares of land were currently under NSIP applications. But the reality was that it was 7,500 hectares, and now the number is greater still. So we know from Great British Energy, and I'm pleased to see the noble Lord Hunt in his place, that there just isn't the grid capacity to accept all the solar that is being promoted. So if
surely the point about this bill is that it's enabling us to put the structures in place to actually get the grid capacity up and running.
Yeah. true, and he makes a good point. And so I sense even further a degree of consensus on both sides of the House on this matter. But if we take the fact that grid capacity isn't there to accept all the solar that is being promoted because it is diurnal, it is seasonal, and it comes in very big flashes which can overwhelm the grid. If capacity to absorb is limited, only a fool would disagree with limiting the proposals to the poorest land first. Now, I have said we need not worry about all of this. Only the amount of land currently used for golf courses is being used for solar, something like 0.5% of all land. But that, of course, is simply not true. It's the 19th whole tale that's grown with the telling. The government's land use framework contemplates that 9% of all land will be used for environmental and energy schemes. And let me say straight away also that the agri-solar is starry-eyed greenwash fantasy. The solar panels are taller, so they're even more visually intrusive, with even more chemicals used to bash the weeds so they don't shade the panels or wrap their tendrils around the steel stanchions. But the principle of controlling solar development aside, this amendment is important because it seeks to remove the loopholes and abuses that we have seen flow from the misuse of the NSIP regime for solar applications, including artificially stringing together many disparate smaller schemes, some miles apart, to get over a hurdle threshold. Now, where I live, a local proposal comprises a dozen different blocks of land spread out over a canvas more than 15 miles wide and 8 miles tall as a device to get over that NSIP threshold. That is an abuse. Now, I can see that it's in the farmer's private interests to sign up for solar. On normal arable economics, a farmer would do well to earn £200 an acre from the fruits of his labours, having invested millions in plant and equipment and subjecting himself to the risks of weather and the market. By contrast, solar developers are offering him the chance to sit on the beach with an index-linked £900 or more. So landowners of really quite small holdings, which have been aggregated together, have given tenant farmers notice to quit, so they can enjoy those inflation-linked payments of over 40 years at many times the rent. But our tenant farmers are amongst the most entrepreneurial growers, not having had the benefit of inheriting land, and we cannot afford to lose their dynamism. Now, I've heard it firsthand, and also in the Daily Telegraph, about the threats with menaces of compulsory purchase for those who do not follow the developer's line, emboldened as it is by the availability of NSIP. I attended a public consultation event in July for the East Pye proposal close to me, where I uncovered a surprising statistic, albeit the display boards told a different story, which time does not permit me to develop. But on this particular proposal, the developer's own agricultural land classification, hidden away at the back of binder 10 of 13, I calculated that the total land area in the best and most versatile category represented 86% of the entire proposal. And further, 12% represented the productive land that is in 3B. Only a negligible 3% was in what one might call the poorest two categories. Now, I drew the attention to my calculation and some factually incorrect statements on the display boards. My lords, the developers' representatives were surly and dismissive. It was only when I declared my interest as a member for your lordship's house that they conceded that a full correction and reconsultation may be necessary. But my subsequent letters seeking clarification and confirmation have gone unanswered. So now we get to the heart of the matter. I have seen with my own eyes that there is little incentive to tell the truth on large-scale solar over the heads of the little people, because they believe that Mr. Miliband will simply rubber-stamp their proposals, regardless of the facts, without the appropriate level of scrutiny, honesty, or integrity. There is no recognition by developers, many of them foreign investors, as my noble friend says, that food security is even a thing. So my amendment will stop the bad behaviours by promoters who think that stringing together smaller schemes into a big one, so the NSIP process will give them a free pass, will be over, and stamp out those threats with menaces over CPO. My amendment will prevent local people from being airbrushed from key decisions affecting the most productive landscapes. My amendment will ensure that there is accountability for those faceless investors who are driving this gold rush and don't give a jot about the countryside, still less our ability to feed ourselves. This is not a ban on solar. Well over half the land in this country would still be available for it under NSIP, just not the 42% that reliably feeds us. Put simply, the NSIP loophole for solar means preventing our nation from striking the right and appropriate balance between food security and energy security, and still less the security of our democratic process. And that's why it must go.
My Lords, I've tabled